presented people like better than starting like 30 seconds after 6 o'clock. We have a really jam-packed hour for you upcoming, and we're just tremendously grateful that you're here. One, I want you to laugh and have a good time. Justice Irving, will you please come sit in the front? You can break your line with me. Some has been quite unreal. So this is our 11th year having this party. I frankly find that a little hard to believe. But this is, I want to kind of tell those of you, let's do this. If you're new, if you've never been before, will you raise your hand, please? Okay, so we've got about half the room who hasn't been here before. So there's sort of 4 things that we're trying to accomplish. When I started seeing this list a little more than 10 years ago, when Super Lawyers was kind of like the only list out there, there are a whole lot more right now. I didn't know a lot of the women lawyers that were on the list, because I don't really have reason to know bankruptcy lawyers or real estate lawyers or even family law lawyers. So I said, well, let's try to figure out how to get them together. And one of my favorite pinch people on the planet is George Housen. And so I said, George, how about let's do something together? So our very first one, we actually had Chief Justice Toll from South Carolina, who talked about baseball. Not quite sure about that as a choice for a women's team. It worked out actually pretty well. It's quite wonderful. And then for some of you who've been attending the last couple of years, we've had it on Zoom as a result of COVID. So we actually haven't been here at First Citizens since 2019. Can you believe that? Time just flies when you're having fun. So that was the first thing, getting to meet each other. Then to get to see old friends, because a lot of us do know each other, and it's just a real honor to be able to spend an hour or so with people that we're frankly quite crazy about, and frankly a lot of real lions in the legal community in North Carolina. Third, we wanted to spotlight legal aid. My thinking about legal aid has been this: if lawyers don't care about providing legal services to people who can't afford them, who's going to care? So us as thought leaders, we want to be able to go back to our communities, go back to our offices, and say, I heard something really amazing that's happening with legal aid. And then lastly, we figured out that it would be helpful if we let some of the older lawyers invite a mentee. So if you're a mentee, if you came here as a guest of somebody else, will you raise your hand? Okay, so we're thrilled. We wanted to have the next generation of potentially top 50 women super lawyers to be a part of this event. So we're tickled that you're here. So why are we here today? You ready? We are here to mourn, and we are here to celebrate. We're here to mourn the retirement of George Housen, the original executive director of North Carolina's Legal Aid, and the only one that's been it for the 20 years of its existence. George is sick. I'm going to hurt George because I bought those green packages over there. We have this amazing thing. All right, don't tell him, okay? So he really likes Abraham Lincoln, and it's actually a portrait of Abraham Lincoln. He has pictures of Abraham Lincoln on his Facebook. So we're very excited about George getting his little gift. The thing that we're going to celebrate, there are 3. One is the hiring of Ashley Campbell to Ashley in a couple of minutes. We're also here to celebrate the 20th birthday of Legal Aid of North Carolina. Oh wow! You know how you slogan that says something about that only a group of people can change the world. Well, frankly, it was a group of volunteers from the North Carolina Bar Association and others that identified the need for legal aid in North Carolina, and that has been at least part of the genesis of what is now Legal Aid of North Carolina. And then we're also here to celebrate our top 50 honorees. So on your chair, there is a way for you to donate to Legal Aid in North Carolina. There's a QR code there. If you have a check, you can do that. But for once again, we have an anonymous $5,000 match. So what we hope to do through cash donations tonight is at least raise $5,000. So we charge you with that. And then with our remarkable silent auction downstairs, that's how we're doing something really special for, it's about the entire room, so I'm gonna try not to. But let me start with members of the judiciary. You're gonna hear introduced in a few minutes, Allison Duncan. Most of you know that Allison is retired from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. We are hold your applause, immensely proud of having Allison on the Fourth Circuit for as long as she was, and we're delighted she's here with us tonight. You'll hear more about her in a minute. She also is a past president of the North Carolina Bar Association. We do have Justice Jimmy Ervin from the North Carolina Supreme Court. You may stand up and turn around if you like.
Would anybody do anything here with it that you didn't have Janet Ward's permission?
Hold your applause. Hold your applause. Jimmy and I passed at Davidson College, and I have picked on him since the very first day, and it is a great sport for me to be able to do so. Most of you know that Jimmy went on the Court of Appeals in 2008. He's been on the Supreme Court since, I think, 2015 or so. And so we're delighted to have you. We have two members of the North Carolina Court of Appeals, Judge Lucy Inman. Lucy, if you will also stand up. Lucy was Superior Court Judge for 4 years. She went on the Court of Appeals in 2015. I'm particularly delighted we have a new guest with us tonight, Judge Darren Jackson. Judge Jackson is on the Court of Appeals. Now,
we're not allowed to clap.
So he came to us, though, by way of the North Carolina House, where he was actually the minority leader in the House. He took the position he is currently in 2021. So Judge Jackson, thank you for being a part of us tonight. So one more retired judge, the Honorable Linda McGee. Where are you? I know you're here somewhere. Okay, so Judge McGee has so many distinctions. She is the retired Chief Judge of the North Carolina Court of Appeals, the longest serving judge to ever serve on the North Carolina Court of Appeals, 26 years. You can clap for that. You don't know, Linda was also the first executive director of the North Carolina Advocates for Justice, which was the North Carolina trial lawyers before that. And then our last member of the judiciary is Guilford County District Court Judge Carolyn Tomlinson Pemberton. She was elected in 2020. Silence says thing, y'all. So our judge has been in I guess the 2020s, about when you were elected.
Yes.
But she came up through the DA's office, so she was actually 14 years as an assistant DA. How many of you know women who work too hard? Raise your hands. Okay, so when Judge Pemberton was working as a DA, she was working weekends as a registered nurse.
Wow.
So she may actually take the hard work. We do have a couple of members, I believe, from the LANC board here, in addition to Judge McGee, who's on the LANC board. Is Nikki Feliciano here? Yeah, there you are. Nikki, thank you, from Pinto Coates Tire. Glad that you're here. And we also have, I believe, former chair Clayton Morgan of Duke Power. Now, okay, you gotta stand back up. So Clayton was the chair of legal aid of North Carolina. He is now the brand new president-elect of the North Carolina Bar Association.
Oh, great.
All right.
Wow.
And if I have my 123 years of history right, you are the first in-house counsel to be president of the North Carolina Bar Association. All right, we have a couple of folks that I thought were going to be here, but let me hit on a couple. Shannon Leskin is here, the interim executive director for NCAJ. We also have, I think, Mary Irvin from North Carolina IOLTA. Nope, don't see her quite yet. And then from Equal Access to Justice, we've got Jennifer Lechner and Jennifer Simmons, or just Jennifer Simmons. Thanks for being here. Catherine Nassaro from North Carolina LEAF. For those of you who don't know, they provide educational support for lawyers who want to go into public service, and it's a wonderful nonprofit. Is Elizabeth Ray here from the NCAWA? No? All right, I missed her, sorry. Hi Elizabeth. So Elizabeth is the treasurer of the North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys. And then I think my last introduction, yeah, close enough, is Shelby Benton, who's also one of our top 50 honorees. The reason I'm doing her now is because she's going to introduce another past president of North Carolina Bar Association. Shelby, too, is a North Carolina Bar Association past president. So, you can see what I mean, right? It's like half the room. It's really cool. So now I have the tremendous opportunity to get to introduce Ashley Campbell to you. So normally we have like a client from Legal Aid come talk about some amazing thing that's happened. But we decided, because George was retiring to get his present, and he's not here, that we would not have a client this time. So I'm going to tell you my little Legal Aid of North Carolina story that Ashley and nobody in the room knows. So I take a little old lady who's 89 years old to Sunday school and church every Sunday morning. And she needed to have a will because she had 2 children die and has grandchildren out of those. And she doesn't have any money. She just really doesn't. And I said, well, have you heard about the Senior Law Project at Legal Aid of North Carolina? And she said, no. And I said, well, I think that if you call them, they'll help you, and they'll help you get a will, and it won't cost you anything. She was overjoyed. I gave her the phone number. She lost it 3 different times. Finally, she hooks up with the Senior Law Project. Then what happens is they keep calling her back, but where she lives, they fixed her cell phone, so if she doesn't have the number in her contacts, it doesn't ring. So every time Legal Aid would call, she would miss the call. Then she found out she needed to have an ID, and her driver's license had expired. And then she needed something else, and so I called her to pick her up last Sunday, and she said, I'm sick. I'm like, okay, all right, well, I'll get you next week. And then I called her about 2 days later, and she said, you know what, I'm sick. She said, I was scared because I had to get this paperwork for them, and I wasn't sure I could find it, and I was kind of upset about it. But then the people here took me down to the Legal Aid office in downtown Greensboro, and I had the nicest people in the whole world help me get my will done, and it didn't cost me anything. And she told me, I am so relieved. Now, that's just one, y'all. That's just one little story that your typical legal aid lawyers are not even going to know about. So I was worried when we had to replace George Housen, because I do love me some George Housen. He always promised me that if I'd run for office, he would run my opposition research. That would be But when I heard that Ashley Campbell was the one, I was so excited. She started as a legal aid lawyer. She's been a chronic volunteer for legal aid. Then in addition, she has worked in the North Carolina legislature, like some other people that we know, but in bill drafting, so a nonpartisan position to try to create that which needed to be created. And then she's had a storied career also as a litigator until in 2016 she joined Campbell Law School to be the head of Blanchard Clinic there. So she's training the boots on the ground to do the remarkable work that Legal Aid does now. So ladies and gentlemen, can we please welcome the new Executive Director of Legal Aid in North Carolina, Ashley Campbell.
Thank you all so much, and thank you, Janet Ward, for all of those wonderful comments. We are so thrilled that Janet Ward has actually agreed to join our board. So she is our newest board member. So anything better we could do for legal aid than to have Janet Ward Black on our board. We're just so grateful to you for this wonderful event, for being so loving and welcoming to me tonight and to us over the years. George absolutely adores Janet Ward and was really sorry that he could not be here today. And I've just loved seeing your relationship over the years and how much you have supported each other. So thank you. When I look around the room tonight, I just see so many women who have inspired me in so many different ways throughout my professional career. I see friends at Legal Aid, which is where I started my career. I see women who I litigated with, women who I serve on the State Bar Council with, women who are leaders in the equal access to justice community, who are in the judicial community. It's just really extraordinary to be with all of you. I'm so inspired by all of you. I would like to take a minute to ask the staff who's here from Legal Aid to stand briefly, if you can, to recognize you. I saw several people coming in. The right out of law school 35 years ago. Cia, who is back here, is our Director of Advocacy and was the first female litigator that I ever saw and admired and wanted to aspire to be like. And so now to be serving in a leadership role with her is just truly wonderful. I'd also like to recognize Dottie Birch, who is my law partner at Rex Delegate. Dottie is a top 50 women lawyer recipient tonight, and she taught me everything I know that I learned in private practice. And so it's just a really full circle moment for her to be here with me tonight as I transition into another job. And I want to say thank you to Dottie for all that she taught me. So I would like to take a minute just to talk about legal aid and where we are and what the future holds. George was actually my first boss. So I started my career at Legal Aid. George was my first boss 19 years ago. So George has been at the helm for 20 years. And many don't know the history, but George consolidated, under his leadership, Legal Aid consolidated into the statewide organization that it is today. Legal Aid used to be little offices all over the state that collaborated but weren't under an umbrella. And so it's taken 20 years to really get this organization in the position of strength that it is today. I think some of you know we have 250 lawyers at Legal Aid. It's the third largest law firm in the state, and 550 employees. We have 20 offices statewide, and so we are providing legal services to citizens all over the state in every county in North Carolina. 1.3 million people in North Carolina live in poverty, so all of those people are eligible for our services. We serve approximately 40,000 people a year, so 40,000 North Carolinians every year are able to call Legal Aid and receive legal services. And of course, we all know those folks cannot afford all of us in the private market. You know, I said for many years when I litigated, I couldn't have afforded myself, and certainly those at the lowest income level can't afford us. So we're able to provide that service, and we're so proud of what we do. But 360,000 people call every year. So even though we're serving 40,000 people with 250 lawyers, so just think about how much amazing work those 250 lawyers and then staff are doing, there is still so much unmet legal need. And we know this from the legal needs assessment that so many in the room were involved in producing. So there's still so much work to be done. And you know, our goal is to work for the next several years to build a plan to meet that unmet legal need, but we can't do it without the financial support of the community. So we're so grateful to each of you who will consider making a donation tonight. It is our 20th anniversary, and we are going to be out talking to local bar associations and sharing our message. Those of you in the room, if you would like for us to come speak to your local bar or meet with folks in your community and we can talk about support for legal aid, I would love to do that and ask that you just reach out to me about that. So thank you so much again for all that you're doing tonight, and turn it back over to Gina.
Turn it to Shelley.
Okay, to Shelby. Our friend
I'm just thrilled to get the opportunity to be here tonight. I've been a number of times and thoroughly enjoyed this event every time I can. I remember the time that we came and the event was not here, it was in Raleigh at the Legal Aid office there, and you brought the former Chief Justice of the court that had been not reelected because of a vote on an abortion issue at the time, which was, again, that was my first one. So I remember fondly very many of them. So thanks. Again, I'm honored to get the opportunity to introduce someone who I have admired for 30 years. When she came on the Court of Appeals in 1990, that was the first time she came into my view. I'd been a lawyer for 5 years at that point, and she has impacted my life for a long time. You have a brief little bio in the handout. I'm not going to hash back over that. You've heard Janet Ward tell you that she served on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. She was the first African-American woman. She was the first woman from North Carolina to serve on that court. She was nominated by George W. Bush, which I'm going to get right this time when I said it wrong a few weeks earlier about that, but she served with distinction in that role. She retired from the bench in 2019, and she had so many leadership roles and continues to maintain some of those leadership roles, which I'll leave you to read in the program that you already have. She currently still is a member of the board of the International Institute of Justice Excellence based in The Hague. She was elected president of the Federal Judges Association. That's an organization that represents over 1,000 Article III judges, and she served on its governing board for a number of years. Prior to coming on to the Fourth Circuit, Judge Duncan was a partner at the law firm of Kilpatrick Stockton and working in their employment and regulatory groups. And she came into that because she came to private practice from serving on the North Carolina Utilities Commission. And her labor and employment background came from the expertise she learned while serving on the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in Washington. First as an appellate attorney there, and then ultimately as the agency's legal counsel. She also has served all of the lawyers across the state and other lawyers that have appeared in front of her. I've heard her make comments to various lawyers that have appeared in front of her that are so encouraging that she probably doesn't know after the fact would say things to me like, I can't believe she said that to me. I made an impression on her. She's such an idol to me, so it's just moving. But she also served in education at North Carolina Central's Law School as a professor for a number of years, which was again inspiring the education of the lawyers across our state. She's been very active in our profession and in her community. She served on several committees with the North Carolina Bar Association, and as Janet Ward already told you, she was the first African-American person to be the president of the North Carolina Bar Association in 2003. Many times she'll say when she's interviewed that I may be first in a lot of things, and maybe it was really late in coming that I got to be the first, but she very much doesn't consider that as being something special to her, but she's proud to be able to have served in this capacity for us. She served on the Duke University Board of Trustees and now serves on the board of the Duke Endowment. She's a founding member of the Carolina Ballet. Isn't that cool? And she's received numerous honors, including the Triangle Business Journal's Lifetime Achievement Award. But she has kept her personal life extremely private. And that is something that I think all of us ought to think about, all the Facebook and all the other things that some of us might do or we find our clients doing, we should do. But she's been an extremely private person. But in my brief little ability to have some personal contact with her and some of her very close friends, I've learned a few things that you may or may not know. just a slight thing. She raises gorgeous orchids. She actually has them where they stay in a greenhouse, and then she brings them back and forth to different places. They're absolutely gorgeous. If you get a chance, the Walter magazine has some beautiful pictures about that. She is a fabulous cook, and she actually knows how to knit a shawl out of possum fur. I have seen her knitting. I have seen her knitting. I've ridden in the car with her while she's knitting. So I know she's really good about it, but when I learned that she could use possum fur, right? Really impressive. So let's welcome Joseph.
Apparently not. When Janet Ward Black asked me to talk to you today about the quality of justice and the importance of providing service, my reaction was, well, that's a daunting task. But I actually do very much appreciate having a few minutes to talk with you today, because it's given me a chance toward the tail end of my career to pull together some of the things I have experienced and to relive some of those that have meant the most to me and have made the most difference in my life. So that's what I'd like to do in the few minutes that we have together this afternoon, is to talk about the core experience that I had on the bench, what meant the most to me, and how what that, I think, in turn, might serve as inspiration in affecting others. And advancing the critical goal of advancing justice around the world. The need is so great. And the women who are gathered here together today being honored and the men who are participating in this gathering. You have so much talent, and the need is so great. So I hope that some of what I learned will help encourage you to know what a difference the power of one or a small group can make. So serendipitously, about two circumstances coalesced about 5 years into my term on the bench. The federal judiciary is governed by an organization called the Administrative Office of the Courts. The AO is composed of a lot of different committees. There's the Federal Rules Committee, there's the Judicial Conduct Committee, and so on. The Chief Justice of the United States appoints both the chair and all of the members of this committee. I very much wanted to be, from the beginning, on the International Judicial Relations Committee. It may not surprise you that so did every other federal judicial. The Committee on Financial Disclosures, not so much. But I had a secret weapon. The Chief Justice rides circuit in the Fourth Circuit. He knew this because he comes to the Fourth Circuit Judicial Conference, right? Yeah. So he came to the Fourth Circuit Judicial Conference. We met at the Greenbrier. And in that lull, you know, that very propitious lull between dinner and dessert, I sort of structured myself or situated myself right behind his chair and waited for a lull in the conversation, which was not long in coming when someone was standing there behind his chair. And he made the mistake of smiling graciously. Well, that was more than I needed. So I presented myself and said, wouldn't it be wonderful if you were to hold a moot court at the only historically black law school in the Fourth Circuit? What could the poor man say? So he came to North Carolina Central and he had a moot court there, and Justice Fry and I and the Chief Justice. It was so cool. The Chief Justice wanders around the library, sticking his nose in students' books, and when they look up to express annoyance, they would go, "Oh my God." We had a small dinner party for him at my home, and I made a point of being the one to serve him his plate. And when I presented it to him, I said, "And I'd really like to serve on the International Judicial." So I did. And he got fed. I served for 6 of the most marvelous years of my life, learning about what judges in other countries have to go through, how they live, what they endure in order to do their jobs. In Pakistan, in East Timor, in Kenya. I don't think I have the kind of courage. I'd like to think I do, but I'm very unsure. But I have the kind of courage it takes them to stand up and face the forces, the political forces they have to contend with. The purpose of the committee is to provide assistance to former Soviet bloc countries who want to learn a little more about the judicial system in the United States. And it later expanded to include Asian countries such as Vietnam and South Korea. It was one of the most remarkable experiences. There were some surreal moments too. I remember where was I? In Ho Chi Minh City, and I was speaking to the head of the Communist Party on judicial reform. Bit of an oxymoron.
Yeah.
I walked in to see him and said, "Hello, how are you?" And he said, "What's so good about precedent?" I said, "Business is like certainty." And he turned to the fellow who was with him and said, "I told you, I know I like precedent." But the most moving experience of all, and this is really the one that I want to talk about the most, came in the form of a role that I did not want. And that was when, as Shelby mentioned, I became president of the Federal Judges Association, which is the organization of Article III federal judges in the country. It was founded in Salzburg after World War II, and it's currently based out of in Rome. And every year we hold a conference and judicial associations from all over the world come to it. I'm the president of the region that includes Asia, which is the focal point of my story. The world changed just almost beyond belief in August of 2021 when the Taliban invaded Kabul. On August 14th, Judge Patricia Whalen, who's an active member of the International Association of Women Attorneys, of which I'm also a member, was on a Zoom call with an Afghan colleague, Judge Anisa Rascoli, who told her, "My life is over." The Taliban was about to overtake Kabul in the face of the United States military withdrawal, and the consequences for women judges would be catastrophic. And that is not an overstatement. At that time, there were about 250 women judges in Afghanistan, approximately 10% of the judiciary. They served in courts that ruled on crime, corruption, terrorism, domestic violence, drugs, and often sentenced men to prison for their crimes, which the Taliban considered unthinkable. On the morning after that conversation, the world witnessed the beginning of the Taliban takeover. Afghan women judges immediately lost their jobs, the prisons were thrown open, tens of thousands of convicts were released, and the names of and addresses of the judges were unsealed. A half a dozen women, under the auspices of the International Association of Women Judges, formed a core team with hangers-on and volunteers like me doing whatever we could do, and opened a 24-hour hotline with 2 translators. We called everybody we could think of. I called the federal judiciary's judicial legislation in the State Department. I called members of the House and Senate. If I could think of anyone who could possibly have some impact, I called him. The government response was consistent. We're focused on the military, we're focused on United States citizens and residents, and previously identified United States contractors. The judges are not our priority. Okay, so it was a remarkable time. We had to find, the first thing we had to do was find safe havens to get these people to. Not only for the judges, but also for their families, including young children who would also be in danger. They didn't have visas. They didn't have entry papers. Some didn't have passports or identification papers, and there were a host of other issues. Flight arrangements, getting to the airport, which the Taliban was guarding, landing rights and agreements with countries to accept them. Do you know how to do any of that? None of us did. None of us. By the end of August, 20 women judges were ready to depart. To reach the airport, and we saw images of this, they had to slog through a sewer-filled trough with inked markings on their heads to identify themselves to Polish military, with their children, some on their shoulders or holding them aloft. Poland was for many a temporary refuge. When the United States completed its pullout on August 20th, then we had to turn to private contractors. Each chartered plane, which held about 400 passengers, cost between $800,000 and $1 million. That was what we were looking at. Helena Kennedy, a member of the British House of Lords and director of the London-based International Bar Association Human Rights Institute, was able to arrange planes which would take people to intermediate stops we call lily pads. Greece, where the then woman president is a former judge, became a temporary safe haven for many. But evacuation wasn't the only problem. The 152 women judges and 558 family members who got out are in 17 countries, including the United States, but their legal status is uncertain. President Biden shortly, later in the fall, granted temporary safe haven status to those who are able to escape. Only a small handful have been able to resettle permanently. At the request of the International Association of Women Lawyers, the international law firm of DLA Piper agreed to represent some of the Afghan women in their efforts with respect to the Judicial Immigration Services. As best I have been able to tell, there are about 70 remaining in the country. And the utterly remarkable thing about this, and this is the point I feel so passionate about, these were private people. This was you, this was me. These were people who had no money, no contacts, just the will to do something that we saw had to be done, and the government was not going to help. The next challenge I have colleagues in the Ukraine who are still holding court. They have written a number of us trying to collect money for body armor, Kevlar, and other protective weaponry and body wear so that they can do their jobs. I could give you story after story after story. But I don't have to. Why don't I have to? Because you know whereof I speak. You know what I'm talking about. Maybe not on that scale, maybe not in another country, but you can see it in eastern North Carolina, where there are as many outhouses as there are people. You know what the needs are. North Carolina, and this is another passion of mine. I have a lot of passion. My mother once told me she expected me to become the patron saint of lost causes. I said, there already is that. But North Carolina is ranked as the 10th highest state in the country for instances of human trafficking. You know someone who's trafficked. I guarantee you.
Absolutely.
And it just takes different forms, and so you tend to think about it as sex trafficking, or it isn't. There's so much, it's that, but it's so much more than that. It's the new form of slavery. It's agricultural trafficking. It's domestic work trafficking in well-to-do New England. You know someone like that. Can you pick them out? There are characteristics that they share. I had the wonderful experience of meeting with the formerly trafficked woman in Hong Kong, whose family had bought her freedom and sent her to school. She is a remarkable photographer, and she won an award, a Pulitzer, for publishing a book of some of the pictures she took to memorialize the circumstances that she and her colleagues had survived. The need is great. It's why you're here. It's why we're all here. It's why we all care. Be aware, be engaged, give, fight.